Okay, my name is Bobby Tillman, and I am interviewing Mr. Roger Brand today. Thank you for taking time to visit with us today and to give us some information about you and your work. We want to be sure it is okay with you for us to record this interview and to use it on the Sachse Historical Society's website and other forms of media. Is that all right?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, would you give us your name?
Roger Brand.
Would you tell us about your family, your children, your family? Anything you'd like to?
Well, my
about?
family with my parents was W.D. William Dwight Brand, better known as Son Brand, and my mother was Imogene she was from Plano. My parents had 3 boys. I'm the middle one. There was a Robert and Roger and Dwight. And we grew up here in Sachse. We had a very nice doctor out of Dallas who owned a bunch of land here, who my daddy was his, he ran the farm and cows. We raised crops. And one of the things that I'll never forget, it was one June afternoon, and the sun was beginning to set behind a bunch of clouds in the northwest, and my mother took my daddy out to some supper to eat at the tractor. So he stopped for a few minutes, ate his supper, and my mother asked him, "Are you going to come in and do the milking of the cows and feeding and all that good stuff at the barn?" And he said, "I really want to get as much of this wheat combine as I can get before it rains tonight." So he was keeping up with the weather. Of course, as kids, we didn't care much about the weather. But we saw that opportunity to ask and to jump up and down and cheer and say, "We can do it, we can do it, let us do it." And my brother, who was 15 months older, he and I went and did the milking of the cows and did all the things that my daddy has done for the last few years. And I think I was 7, my brother was 8 years old. And I consider that today to be the dumbest day of my life, because my brother and I, for the next 10 years, never missed milking those 2 cows.
You had a job then, didn't you?
Yeah. And we really wanted to prove ourselves, and we did. And we proved I know we did a lousy job milking those cows, but we got pretty good at it.
Where were you born? Were you born here?
I was born at a hospital in Dallas, and we lived those early years in a little house out here that the Brands family owned, next to the big house, which is now on Campbell Road, just north of the Firewheel Golf Course. That's where we spent our first few days, and then we lived in Garland just for a short time. I came to Sachse, and Daddy became the sharecropper for Dr. Massey, which is a wonderful person, a great family out of Dallas. When I was probably about 2 years old, I was born in '37, so I was probably here in Sachse when I was about 2 years old. And they built a house and a barn and sheds, and we lived there until 1954. And a lot of memories on that place that we were, and that's on Bunker Hill Road. And the other land, about 350 acres, was out here now where the subdivision is, all the houses are now, the golf course. I'm trying to think of that subdivision name now. I can't think of it anyway.
How about the Firewheel Golf, off Rand Road?
No, it's off of Highway 78. In that big subdivision that's been built out there now for the last 10 years, I guess.
Woodbridge?
Woodbridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a Woodbridge, and the golf course is there, and we had we had about 100 head of cows down there, and we had a lot of farming equipment. And Dr. Massey's brother owned a piece of property just across the road. It's now called Sachse Road, and where the water tower is. And he had about 106 or 7 or 8 acres. And in 1947, Dr. Massey wanted my parents to buy that. And he was asking $11,000 for that 100+ acres. And my parents didn't have the money, didn't have the means to finance it. So Dr. Massey gave my parents either $5,000 or $6,000, and then parents got a loan for the rest of it and paid it out over the years. And that was one of my first experiences of real estate. Was my parents in '47 buying that tract of land, farming it, paying for it, and my mother sold it after my daddy died, and it was her retirement. It helped supply her with enough money to make ends meet and help us kids out too when we need some help.
A lot of money and a lot of land at that time, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I have somewhere the original documents of that. If I could find it, I want to make sure it comes to the museum. I think it's up in my attic somewhere. I got to take time to go up there and dig for it. But that's
Interesting to look at stuff like
hunted
that.
doves down there. Our property line was with Joe Stone's property, and we'd walk our side of the fence rows stirring up some doves, and we'd hunt those doves, and we'd hunt rabbits when it winter and snowed, and hunt even some quail in that area back in those days.
So you and Joe were we were neighbors then, I guess, weren't you?
Yeah. Of course, everybody in Sachse back in those days knew everybody.
Not that many people, I guess.
Just a handful.
Now you mentioned before we started the interview, you went to school here, a building burned or something, or what was the?
When I was in Garland had a school building, and then they had a high school. And the school building burned when I was in the 2nd grade, and I spent about the next year and a half in church basements, and they rebuilt the school, and I went back to that new school building called Central Elementary in the 4th grade. Had a bunch of real nice teachers and principals in those days in the school that I remember. And then they built another elementary school called Freeman Elementary, and that I think is on the street on Walnut. And because I lived in the Sachse area, that was kind of a north. I think they kind of split it north and south. So I went to the new building, the new Freeman School, and I went there in the 6th grade. And in the 7th grade, we'd been in junior high school. Didn't have a junior high school then. We went into Army barracks. That was in the 7th grade, I believe it was. And then they built the they built the junior high school when I was in the 8th grade. So I went to 8th and 9th in the middle school, and then I went to high school in Garland. And part of that junior high school now is part of the high school.
Oh, so when you went to Garland High, I guess that's the only high school here then, wasn't it?
Only one in town.
Well, Freeman Middle School is still where it is now. It's over by the post office, isn't it? Across the street from
Same place.
down the post office, main post office. So you graduated from high school then, what year?
I graduated in '56. We were dealing with school in town. We had a pretty good football team, and I was fortunate enough to play football, and Homer Johnson was one of our coaches, and Bill Ellington was our head coach, and we dominated our district back in those days, and I was fortunate enough to play football, and I enjoyed it very much. And because I was a little squirt playing in the line, and we were undefeated, went all the way to the state championship before we got beat. And I really wanted to keep playing football, and I couldn't get a scholarship. I was 160 pounds, soaking wet, and so I walked on at TCU, and I enjoyed playing their 1 year of freshman football. Not for me anymore. I wasn't big enough to compete with those big boys and very well. So I hung up that, and then the second year I just kind of had a good time, and after that I knew that I didn't go to school to get an education very much, so I gave it up, got married, had two wonderful children. Rajan and Angela was our two girls, and they went to Garland schools, and they both went to Texas Tech and graduated. Enjoyed my life. I worked at Texas Instruments for 14 and a half years. After that, I wanted to do something. I wasn't sure what it was. My uncle Cecil Cooper was in real estate, and I asked him one night if he would sponsor me to get my license, and he said sure. So I got my license, and now I've been in real estate for over 42 years, actually 43 years now.
When did you start that? I guess you subtract back 43, but it was 69, 70, somewhere there?
1970, I got my license, and I worked part-time with my license for about 3 years. And then I took the big step forward. Jumped into the business.
Jumped into it. So you've been continuously in the real estate business here in this area for that long?
And still in.
Still are.
Still
going.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, Don.
Sorry I'm so late.
That's all right. That's all right. We're going to town here.
All right.
You want to? You can do it.
Oh, I'm good. No, Bobby, I'm fine. I'll just pop in and out.
I just want to make sure it keeps going. I don't know where it's shut off. It ran out of battery, but that's all I wanted. All I got's the introductory stuff on that one. So.
The key.
No.
The key. The key to the mailbox.
Thank you, and I've got your key.
I'm sure that's the right one this time.
Yeah, who all has keys to the office building here? Do you know? Is that something that needs to be changed, or I know we got the one on the lot deal outside there.
Yeah, I see the lots over
Yeah,
there.
I get that because I was the only way I get it.
I think I've already given up the key to the front door.
Yes, I've got that one. And
Yeah,
there's
and-
this key that must be to something you need.
I don't know what that's for, but I know it's something.
Something important. Well, I've got I probably won't wind up with the key eventually. I've been just going to the back deal and getting it out, and I thought, well, I'll probably stick with one. I came by this morning about 7:30 and turned the heater up a little bit because it was cold. And I don't know if you could turn back down.
Okay.
But anyway, all right. So we've started into the real estate business here. Let me see here. Now is Brand Road out here, is that named after your family? The one that's okay. So that was probably your grandparents that got the property.
My grandparents had 9 children, and my daddy they had 10 children. My daddy was the 9th child, and they had their farm out there, and I remember those days. It was the house was kind of 2-story and a little bit unique. Had a big porch, wide porch in the back of it, and it included a big water
Cistern or something?
No, it wasn't a cistern. It was just a well, just a big old well, and they had water in their house because they had the well in their house.
Oh, wow.
And I've never seen that ever again. Now I've seen the cistern stuff, but this was unique. And that bell that we have out here right now was out in just a short ways from the house. And I remember ringing that bell
The mill that's out here in the museum?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was on y'all's property. Where did it come from? Initially, did they?
But the Brand family had it out there on their house forever.
Huh.
Long before I came into the world.
It was just there. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, you've seen a lot of changes in it, Sachse. What, I guess, would be the most notable changes that you've noticed? Obviously, it's gotten a lot bigger, and it's, you know, but,
Well, it was a little bump in the road. Now it's a thriving little community. It's a nice town, good city. It's got a lot of. It's just growing up like I guess all other little towns grow up. It's got all the city services that it didn't have when I was a kid. What I remember was there was two little grocery stores. I mean, about the size of this, maybe smaller than this building here. And my daddy would stop and get $1 worth of gas. And he would get about 5 or 6 gallons of gas for $1. And the gasoline was like 17, 18 cents a gallon. And I remember one time when they were charging 18 cents when last week it was 17 cents. He threw a fit like, what do you think? A penny for another nickel's worth of gas to fill up my car? He said, you gotta be kidding me. And those are, when you live from those days to this days, it's quite a change. It makes you think maybe you've lived long enough.
Well, you got some time left on it.
I guess.
Well, how do you see our city changing over the next few years? I mean, what do you envision will happen here? There's not a lot of physical room for industry, but mostly.
Well, there is some room
along the
for that. Of course, cities are going to grow like this city grew when they had the railroad. Cities grow where there's access. You got to have highways. I never thought we'd see this road we have now between Sachse and Wiley. I remember the one that we used to have, now called Sachse Road. It's got a few twists and turns and some narrow bridges. Speaking of bridges, we lived on Bunker Hill. We had this land out here that we worked on the other side of town. And there was and I love to, just like your average 10-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I'll never forget the day when my daddy said, take this tractor and take it back to the house, which is all the way across town from almost the Wiley city limit sign to almost the Garland city limit sign. And I just got going good and put it in high gear, which was 4th gear, and pulled that throttle back, and here I'm buzzing down a road probably about 15 miles an hour maybe. And I come to this bridge, and there's a Greyhound bus coming. And this bridge is a narrow little bridge. And the Greyhound bus driver was flashing his lights, off and on, off and on, off and on. And I looked at it and I thought, what is that bus driver trying to tell me? About that time we hit the bridge at the same time. I knew real quick what that bus driver was trying to tell me, and I wish I'd paid attention because I tell you, that was a close call. I do believe that the good Lord, and I do believe in Him, was taking that tractor over, and maybe the bus too. There wasn't a room between the railing in this tire and the bus in this tire. There's just no room. And we made it through that. I think about it today, it scares me. Back then, I was so dumb I didn't know to be scared, you know, and I'm just driving that tractor and here we go.
Where was that? Is that bridge on Sachse Road, one of those that's there now?
It sure is. It's right there by Joe Stone's old place, and one that we had. It's still there. Every time I see it, I think about that.
Oh, right there by where Happy Acres place is now? Is that the one right down before that curve?
No, it's just past that, back towards Wild Agency. Where
Where
Joe Stone's line was
Oh, it's
and ours, a little bridge right there, it's still a
down
drainage
at the
thing.
bottom there where that house is built on stilts, sort of, maybe.
Yeah, well, just a little past that, yeah.
Well, yeah. What do you think that the, you're in the real estate business, and I'm on this tip where I know out here on George Bush are trying to get, you know, any kind of development reasonable, you know, that's appropriate for the community. Do you see that materializing in the next few years? Or?
Yes, yes. I remember when George Bush was just an ideal. And it was called Loop something, Loop 9 or whatever, and people were buying properties that they thought would be a nice place to invest, and it certainly was. When they extended Bush through the Sachse area, south towards Interstate 30, there was a lot of vacant property that will become valuable. There will be there'll be commercial, there'll be residential, and I think the residential will be first. And as the people build enough homes, then the businesses will follow. And you'll have little strip shopping centers here and there, and maybe some industry will build a big high-rise somewhere down through there. There'll be a couple of hotels down through there, and yeah, it's just
Do you think it kind of built from 30 northward, northwest, or whatever?
yeah. There really isn't anything south of 30. It dead ends there, but you know, look at Bush and North Carolina Avenue, where the two hotels are now, and that Walmart and Sam's and the
Target. Right?
restaurants, the Outback Steakhouse, and all those things are only there because George Bush came through there.
Yeah.
And it'll be from that part of the south side of Sachse will be one of the.
How in the world did they have the foresight to put those 8 billboards out there in the middle of the pasture? I was around here when they were trying to figure out where the toll road was going to go. And that was 20 years after they put those signs up. And that road, the freeway goes right smack dab through the middle of them. How did they?
Somebody knew something.
That's why. How could they have known
Well,
that and it actually turned out that way? I mean,
The path for the road was pretty much set. There may have been a little bit of gambling by the people who put those big billboards out there, but it certainly worked out. When Bush was first built, as I recall, people want to put billboards up. You know, that was a thing. And I think the population has said, we don't like all these billboards. It kind of junk up the highway. We have this beautiful highway, landscaped highway. And we got these big old billboards everywhere. So they passed the rules, there are laws that says no more billboards can be built. But if you built the billboards before the road, you're okay. But you can't do it after the road is built. That's why those were built.
I know, I was, you know, like I said, I was built in the mid-80s, and those billboards were put up out there, and I kept, you know, but even the toll road, there was some debate about whether it was going to go through there or it was going to go a southern type route and kind of miss Sachse, you know. But it wound up there, and I thought somebody either knew something or they had some.
Well, the rule change that caused them to go out there and take a chance, I guess.
Yeah.
And it worked out well for them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're not too bad. They keep them. Do you feel Sachse is a good place to live or work, and would you encourage folks to move here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think Sachse has, that's one of several big things that Sachse has going for it. It is a good community to live. And if you don't think so, ask Highland Homes. They have been out here building houses like crazy for several years and will continue to build for several years. Sachse, Wiley, and Murphy, it used to be bumps in the roads, are now 3 cities growing together, much like Richardson and Garland and Dallas grew together 40 years ago. It's happening. It'll continue to happen until the good Lord decides that he needs to come back and take over, which could happen before all that happens, but you never know.
Well, there's at least hundreds of houses, permits for houses right now, I understand, are to construct in the Sachse, basically in the city limits of Sachse. You've got the Lennar and Highland and Merritt, and all those developments going on. Just
The housing industry is a big part of our economy in this country. And it's hard, I think, for us to understand just how big it is, how important it is. I'm in the real estate business, and I still have a hard time understanding just how big the building industry is to our country. When our home sales are down, our economy is really taking a dip down too. When it's up and strong, well, the whole economy is doing very well.
Are you mostly involved in commercial or residential or both, or in your business?
99% of mine has been residential.
Approximately what is the average selling price or purchasing price or whatever you call it right now of houses in Sachse? Do you have some kind of feel for that?
Well, I don't think it's a lot of difference between Sachse and Murphy.
Well, this general area, I guess.
This is not, in my opinion, not rural anymore. It used to be very rural when I was a kid. It's all connected now. Most of Murphy is Plano schools. Most of Sachse is Garland schools, just like most of Rowlett is a Garland schools. It's coming together and all connected.
Would you tell us about organizations you have been associated with and any that you're currently involved in? I know you're active in the Historical Society and obviously real estate.
Well, I'm a member of the local real estate board and the state board and the national board of realtors. I have been in the Lions Club for several years. I have been in the Rotary Club for a bunch of years, which I really think that the Rotary Club is actually used to be a pretty big group of people, and it's shrinking constantly, as I understand all civic organizations are. But the amount of good that Rotary does for the community with the few people that we have, I think it's absolutely amazing. It's just a great organization. And I think all civic organizations are very similar in that way, but I really think the Rotary it does more with less than any that I've seen.
Is it the Garland Rotary, or because I believe Sachse has a Rotary here, do they?
Not that I'm aware of.
What do you feel that our city is doing well, and what could it do better? As far as the government and the leadership and all here, I'm not being critical. I'm just asking what do you think we're doing good, what the city's doing good, and maybe some things that they could look at to improve the situation, or maybe could do better. Anything that comes to mind?
I don't have any specific things, but I think any person and any city and any government can do better. I think there's always room for improvement. I don't have anything that I can name and pinpoint, but there's always room for improvement. Our government has got, I think, more room to improve than it's ever had before in my lifetime, in a way.
You talk about national or local or both, or?
I'm talking about the big boys, Washington, D.C.
All right there. What special events come to mind during your time in Sachse? Which ones stick in your mind that you would like to tell us about?
When I was a kid, there wasn't any special events except when the church had a watermelon supper after church on Sundays, we used to go to the Sachse School, which is no longer a school, but the building is still there. We used to go there and have parties, and it was something to look forward to as a kid. Matter of fact, as a kid, you roam around in some of those old rooms, to open doors and see what's in there, and you see big old stacks of books. And I brought some of those books home with me, and I gave 2 or 3 of them to the museum here. I don't know where they are right now, but those were books that were written back in the very early 1900s, and maybe a couple of them in the 1800s. They were school books.
There was a school here in Sachse at that time, or about that time, wasn't there?
Yeah, my daddy went to school here in Sachse, Sachse
Where was
Elementary School.
where was the school building?
It's just right over here. I don't know what street it's on, but it's still there. I'd love to see the museum buy that and clean it up, fix it up, and turn it into something that's really, you could grow there for the next 50 years, probably.
Well, that'd be a good, that's something we need to put on the,
If I ever win the lotto, it's going to happen.
or dig up some gold coins. Did you hear about those people that dug those gold coins?
Where was it when they...
In California. They won't tell exactly who or where, but it's worth $10 million.
Oh, it's always California. Where all the gold is.
I saw my neighbor out digging his yard up this morning.
Well, we should trade them some natural gas for their gold.
Yeah. Oh Lord. But that was, that could have gone unknown, noticed forever, or dug up and thrown in the dumpster. That's happened. But
Yeah.
That's crazy.
One of the things, some of the people here haven't been here as long as I have, they talk about the onion sheds. The onion sheds. I remember the onion sheds. And that is, most people here today in Sachse has no idea what that really was, or what it looked like, or where it was, but actually onion sheds.
Where was it? Where were they?
By the railroad tracks up here by this church.
By the Christian church, First Christian Church?
No, not the Christian church, the
Oh,
Assembly of God.
Oh, North Place.
Yeah, Assembly of God Church. It's right there where their parking lot is there now. They used to have 2 onion sheds, and there was 1 onion shed. Now there's no onion sheds.
I've found that many folks we have interviewed have been special places, done unusual or unexpected things, or met really interesting people. Which places, people, things come to mind that you might have encountered in your illustrious lifetime?
Well, I told you about the Greyhound bus and the tractor. That was a highlight of a lot of my days. When I think about it, it still is. I tell you, you used to have to ride that school bus, and there was, all these people are dead and gone now. Hopefully they're all in heaven. Rex Bailey, he was a few years old. Well, he was several years older than I was. He was probably in high school when I was in elementary school. He rode the school bus like everybody else did. And he was able to just look at me and get me to do things that I shouldn't do. And he enjoyed that a lot. I can't say that I did, but he did. And the bus driver kept his eye on us all the time. And the bus driver only had one eye. And he could, when he had the glass eye on one side, and he'd keep that good eye on that mirror looking back at us. I don't want to hang it over the bus, but he did. And he did a good job. But Rex Bailey would get me an Arliss James. And Arliss James was just a good old kid. He was one of the last people to get on the school bus, but we were almost one of the last ones too. And Rex would get me and Arliss into a little scuffle, and Artist didn't want to mess with me, and I didn't really want to mess with him either. But Rex got us going.
He was an instigator.
Yeah. Those were some, it wasn't just happened once or twice, it happened every day on the bus. Oh, that was one of the things that I will always cherish, those days. And that the people in Sachse, what made it what it was. There's a lot of good people in Sachse in those days, and I'm sure it's still that way today. But there wasn't many people back then, but they were all good people, friends, worked together, and it was made a nice little community.
Pleasant place to live, huh?
Yeah.
I didn't ask this earlier, but were you ever in the military? Did you serve? Were you the service?
I was in ROTC at TCU one year.
Well, that's good.
And I was in the Grenadiers marching team, went down to the Mardi Gras and marched a couple nights down there. No, I'm not in the military.
How did you become How did you become involved with the Sachse Historical Society, and when?
Well, having all the roots here in Sachse that I had, I don't remember who called me, but somebody called me, wanted to know if I would be interested in serving on the board. And having a big soft spot in my heart for Sachse, I was very willing to do that. And this has been a great organization. I hope it continues to grow and develop, and 50 years from now it's still going strong. That's my wish for the Sachse Historical Society.
What do you think that the society as a group could do, maybe better? You mentioned about the school building. That would be a major project, but that's not, this was a major project here at one time. That or other things can you think of that the Historical Society might want to consider for the future, or different things we might could do, or events or projects?
Well, there's a lot of people have a lot of old memories sitting around in their garage or storage buildings that they will never ever use. Their kids don't really want it. The Sachse Historical Society, or any historical society, is designed for those items to come together and be preserved. And I would hope that this organization will continue to do that. And with people's, like the lady down in Houston, she's given us a lot of nice things that she has cherished and kept. And now it's things like that. It's what makes a museum a museum.
Well, that's kind of part of the reason to do these interviews, is because, you know, you've got stories about things that no one else would know about our area here. And down the road, a few years, even the younger folks are going to be older at some point in time, as you mentioned, Lord didn't come back.
I've still got a few things at my house that I need to get up here too. I've got a big rock that my daddy had in his farm out in Arizona. It's about this big around. And in that rock there's a ball about the size of a softball. And it's got a little place ground out of that big rock where you put your corn. And you take this ball and you twist it, and your corn becomes cornmeal.
Grinder.
The Indians, the Apache Indians, use that to grind their corn.
Huh.
So they could cook their biscuits, or cornbread, or whatever.
You mentioned Arizona. Did your folks live in Arizona for a while, or did you, or just had some place?
Just a place that he did some ranching. When the farming and ranching here, well, not the ranching necessarily, but the farming here kind of got, the land kind of wore out, and people were kind of moving in, and there were places where they had irrigation, that cotton, and I heard about it, and then I actually saw it. The cotton in Arizona was way over my head when I was in high school. a stalk of cotton. And here, it do good to get knee high. And there you could get as much as 3 to 4 bales of cotton per acre. And here you do good to get a half a bale per acre. So he wanted to do some of that kind of farming, and that's why Arizona got into the picture. But we stayed here. We were all involved in school and stuff, and he traveled back and forth.
That's why you were in. So while you were still growing up in school here, then. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us that we can include in this? We talked about some things. I'm sure you've got lots of interesting stories and events.
There's a lot I could say, but we don't have time for it. One of the things that comes to my mind was this land that my parents bought, 106 or 8 acres. There was a little, right across from Joe Stone's house, we had a 5 acre, we called it the prairie, because we cut it and baled hay for the cows every year. That's all we used it for. And it was a neat little place, about 5 acres, and a guy wanted to buy it. And he wanted to pay like $4,000 for it. Well, we only paid that $11,000 for the whole thing, and my parents only paid $5,000 or $6,000. He come out and he wanted to talk to my daddy about buying it. And my daddy said, "Well, I'll take $4,000." The guy said, "Well, no, I'm not going to give you that much for it. It's too much." He said, "Okay." Well, the guy came back the next year. He said, "Okay, I think I'll go ahead and give you that $4,000." My dad said, "Well, $4,000? Where do you get that?" He said, "Well, you said, well, that was last year's price. It's $4,500 today." I had a guy get upset and he'd go away. He came back the next year and he said, "Okay, I'm going to do the 45. He said, "45? Where did you get that at? 45? Oh, that was last year's price. This year it's $5,000. And the man paid $5,000 for it.
Where was this property now?
Over on
Sachse Road?
Sachse Road, yeah.
That's for sale right now, I think.
That's what's for sale right now for $900,000.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Got a house
I
on it
love
though.
that
but,
lot.
yeah. That's the one
Okay.
that's for sale. Goldbecker has it, yeah.
Well, you mentioned something about the property where this is, or the cemetery that your folks had deeded to the city or sold or something, is that?
Well, this is, I recall, and all this is second-hand, third-hand information passed down, that the church, the site the church was on and the cemetery was donated by William Sachse, which is my great-grandfather. And when the cemetery bought this property here back to the railroad track, between the funeral home and the railroad track, what is the quarterback name for the Cowboys that
Staubach?
Roger Staubach's company was given the railroad hired them to to sell that property, and the cemetery people wanted to buy it, and they couldn't get together on the price, and so the Roger Staubach's people said, "Go and get an appraisal. We want an appraisal, an appraiser who has these initials behind their name, very experienced, qualified people." And we did that, got the appraisal, came back for $45,000. And the cemetery said, "Okay, we'll pay you $45,000 for it. We did just what you said to do." And the Staubach's people said, "No, we're not going to take $45,000 for it. We want a whole lot more than that." So finally, I told the Roger Staubach guy, my great-grandfather gave that property to the railroad. And now you won't even take twice what it appraised for. And after that, we got the deal done. Now, I don't know if what I said meant anything to him or not, But we finally got it done. We bought it at $90,000. That little piece of property.
Wow.
But they knew the cemetery was the one that's going to buy it. They knew the cemetery was going to charge $800 for a little spot of land that was about
Cemetery plot.
a cemetery plot, and they calculated out that this is worth a lot of money to the cemetery, so we can get some extra money for it. But we were getting nowhere until I told him, hey, we gave that land. My great-grandfather gave that land to the railroad. Now you want all that money for it? Come on, man, let's get serious. You know, we finally bought it for twice what it appraised for.
Wow.
But the railroad actually owned it?
Yep.
Your great-grandfather gave it to the railroad, for the railroad?
Mhm.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
Huh.
And this is there's a lot of, you know, like any town would have a lot of history. It's all caused by the people and created by the people, and William Sachse apparently, when he came here in 1845, he literally was driven off by the local Indians. Came back a year or two later, and the Indians, I understand, had kind of calmed down. And he was quite a business person. He had some pretty good vision for what would work, what wouldn't work. And I'm sure, like any other business person, he thought about how it could benefit his pocketbook. He brought the first pigs to Sachse. Did he get to eating the bacon from those pigs? No, he did not. The bears killed and ate his pigs. People don't realize bears were running around here like dogs do today, and killed his pigs.
That would have been the late 1800s?
Well, I don't know how late it would have been, but it was been sometime between 1845 when he first got here and the end of, I think he died before 1900, was it 1890 something when he died, I think. I don't either. But there was a lot of, he owned a square block near downtown Dallas at one time.
I've heard that.
And he was the bondsman for Collin County at one time. Somebody at Collin County ran off with $55,000, and that number may have grown a lot over the years, I don't know. But ran off with all the money, and he had to make good that because he was the bondsman for it. And he had to sell his Dallas square block to make good that. And he would flag he'd get out there and wave the train down, get on the train, follow into Dallas, do what he wanted to do, get on the train, come home. Never had to buy a ticket because he gave the right of way. That was part of the deal. I'll give you this right of way, but I want to go anywhere your tracks go. And apparently they agreed to that.
Huh. Well, anything else that you can think of? This is neat.
No, I've made up all the stories I can think of to make up.
Well, I appreciate your time. This is interesting. I enjoy listening to people talk about stuff. I mean, we've been here 20 years, but that's just a drop in the bucket, you know.
Well, Sachse's always got a big spot in my heart. I always, when I hear the word Sachse, the lights go on.
Well, you don't live in Sachse, actually, do you? Or do you live?
No, actually, Bunker Hill Road is the dividing line between Garland and Sachse. Our house was on the Garland side of Bunker Hill Road. To my knowledge, I have never lived in the city of Sachse.
Oh,
But I've lived on the border for a whole bunch of years.
yeah. Almost like it.
I now live in Richardson. Lived in Garland for a long, long time.
So back then on that side of the road, you still went to the Sachse school. There wasn't a big determination about where you'd go to school.
The school bus didn't make any difference. They get kids on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
And took them to the town where the school was.
Because that made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.